Lots of fun coming your way this weekend on U62.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start.
In my mind and in my car, we can't rewind, we've gone
Good
too
morning.
far.
Listening to Avnewscast.com on News Talk 1380. And can I say it? You're listening to Hour 1.
Yes.
Hour 1, our expanded show.
Woohoo!
Oh, it's great to be here on Friday.
Yes, it is.
We're going to do part 2. We're going to bring on Michelle Egberts and do part 2. We were talking to Michelle on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly woke up the Antelope Valley with this show.
Oh, boy, it got everybody talking.
Not just the antelope.
You know, yeah, and it was a great show, and I know today's going to be a great show. First hour, we've got Michelle Egberts. On our second hour, we will have our very own Palmdale Mayor Pro Tem, Tom Lackey.
All right.
Uh-huh.
So that's going to be great. Let's go right to it. Can we bring Michelle on? Is she on? No, we can't bring her on. We can.
There we go.
My producer. Yeah. Hey, Michelle, are you with us?
She told us no.
Good morning. Yes, I am.
Good morning. Thanks for being here for part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah.
Now
Part 2.
It's time to educate.
Yes.
Yeah, educate us so we can understand.
Yeah, we had a conversation last night, and I think we laid the groundwork before. And so today is now going to be all about education.
Okay.
Yes, and also not only educating the general public of, sexual assault and everything, but it's also not overlooking the victims of these crimes.
I hope not.
Right, which is, hi, Michelle, this is Steve, which is very important because, part of, what I got out of the lawsuit, and I know you're not part and party to the lawsuit between John Doe, Jane Doe, and Jake Doe in the city of Lancaster, but part of what I got out of that lawsuit was it was not really looking at the victim. It was only looking at the person who perpetrated it and their loss of rights.
Well, that's the position that she's taking.
Well, and that's true, essentially because that's what we were suing over was the sex offender ordinance, the way that it was written and everything. However, the victims are not forgotten in any way, shape, or form. They are key stakeholders in prisoner reentry when the individuals come out, and that's why I'm no expert on this, but I've done a lot of studying on it and research because I worked with these offenders, and I definitely want to be familiar, with them and the stats and everything.
Right, but I would assume if a victim is a stakeholder, let's say. The victim's position is going to be when this person does get out of jail or prison, I would just like them banished from the planet. That would probably be their decision.
Well, that's true, Steve. However, the victims of these crimes also have restitution that's owed to them from the perpetrators. Okay, and however, if the restitution can't be made or obligated to by the individual finding employment, how are they supposed to feel like they've been satisfied to a certain degree?
Yeah, but isn't there doesn't the state have a victims fund that they pay out of?
Yes, they do, actually, and that's a very good question. It's called, and people aren't aware of this, it's called the Victim Compensation and Government Claims Board. There's certain crimes, especially serious and violent crimes, that are covered under the Victims Compensation Board. And people aren't notified of that. I mean, sometimes law enforcement does tell you about it, but in a lot of cases they don't. And another fact here is when the district attorney puts in for the restitution order and everything, they don't necessarily, in all cases, over 60% of the cases, they don't put in the victim's information where to send those payments to. Because while they're incarcerated, especially in state prison, they're assessed a penalty of 55% deduction in any money that comes into them or any money they make through inmate pay goes into their restitution.
Right,
but however, they can't connect with it. Connect with the victim.
Right now, being released from prison, and let's just use this as a hypothetical. Being released from prison and having a felony or multiple felonies makes it extremely difficult to become gainfully employed, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. There's a lot of hindrances to employment that that the employer sees out there, like negligent hiring and everything. However, that's why it's important for the employers to align themselves with the EEOC's latest decision, which was April 12th of last year. And the EEOC has come down with some more protective measures over former offenders. Because what's happening essentially right now is, it's a disparate impact on those that are of African-American race or Hispanic race in job decisions and everything. And it's a violation of the Title VII of the 1964 Act.
What is a violation? To choose not to hire a felon?
Yes, and give them proper due process in the before they can make an adverse decision based on a report. They have to actually contact the individual and give them a certain amount of time of notice so that they can clean it up or they can explain it further.
Right, but a lot of employers, with a job application or if they're considering somebody, tend to run background checks, and then they filter them out by
Well, they filter them in the application. If you click felony, it's really a done deal right then.
Yeah, that rings the bells.
It's not a done deal right
well,
then.
no, I'm just saying in
a
a lot of companies, it's just pretty cut and dry. I can't even get a job here. Forget it.
And that'll get you a lawsuit.
But even if they don't say we're not hiring you because you're a felon, they'll come up with something like hygiene issues or something that they can put in there.
Right, they do. But however, employers need to understand too that the consumer reports that they're getting on the background checks, a lot of that information is not accurate.
Well, the felony is.
Right. Well, I have heard that too.
No, the rap sheets are not essentially accurate. No. They're not, and there's statistics on that.
Well, what I'm saying is that if I was to go for a job and you did a background check and it came up felony, that would be inaccurate because I've never gotten a felony in my life. But I haven't met anybody that had a felony that went for a job interview and said, "Oh, I'm surprised I had a felony like 2 years ago and it wasn't there." It's always been there. So I don't know what part is not accurate.
Well, right, but what you're saying, Michelle, is because what I've heard is oftentimes on somebody's background check, it will come up a felony, even though that may have been the original reason that they were arrested. But at the end of the day, they were able to plea it down to a misdemeanor.
Right,
but
exactly.
Felony still shows.
Right. And it shouldn't show, however, and that's where we get into the rap sheets and all of that and getting the information accurate. But the main thing is to have transparency with the potential employer, to let them know up front. I have this felony, I've been so many years conviction-free. And to admit responsibility and accountability for it.
Right. Okay, so and I understand that. So going back for just a second, let's just talk about the victims' rights and the lawsuit against the city of Lancaster for their ordinances. To me, the city of Lancaster is really looking out for the victim and future perpetrations, but the lawsuit is really looking out for the criminal that committed the act.
Well, yes and no. Okay, the city of Lancaster with that ordinance is actually doing the opposite. It's putting them more at risk, the victims and other potential victims as well.
Explain that a little bit, because I still don't. Explain that a little bit, because I still don't get how that's the case.
Well, when you have so many restrictions, on top of the offender coming out of prison and everything, like with their families and being removed from where they were living, and if they live near a park or a school or a church that has a preschool, anything like that, you're restricting their environment a little bit more and actually going to possibly create homelessness. And that's one thing that we don't want. We don't want homelessness. We want to have these individuals, living somewhere where they can be supervised, essentially, especially with Operation Boo on Halloween. We want to know where they are, and that's like I tell individuals. How well do you know your neighbors?
Right. So by creating a situation where these people are homeless, you're saying it puts them in a position of reoffending?
Well, I'm not saying necessarily that they're going to reoffend with a new sex crime, okay? Because it's only 1.9% recidivism rate as far as a sex offender committing a new sex crime. However, when you talk about technical violations and new crimes other than a sex crime, it's a lot higher rate. It's about 67%.
Right, and I can appreciate that because no longer is their life structured because they're not living under a roof, but they're just roaming.
Exactly,
Right.
and I mean, exactly. And there's a lot of restrictions too, as far as public housing. Let's say the center, the homeless center, the in between. A sex offender in that environment is not safe.
Right,
They're not, and there's a lot of restrictions there.
Okay, well, I want to
But-
talk to you about that. Hang on a second, Michelle. I've got to take a break, and we'll be right back, okay?
Yep.
All right, just a second. So you're listening to avnewscast.com on News Talk Radio 1380, the Antelope Valley's #1 News Talk Radio program, and we'll be right back.
City streets you used to walk along with me, and every step I take reminds me of just how it used to be. Well, how can I forget you?
This is a public notice from Varango Solar. If you're a Southern California Edison customer and your electric bill is over $150 per month, this could be your last chance to submit an application to convert your home to solar with the Zero Money Down Government Rebate Program. To see if you qualify, call 800-998-9700. The California Solar Initiative expanded state support of solar technology as part of the governor's Million Solar Roofs vision for California. A number of Southern California utilities have been forced to shut down their government incentives due to budgetary constraints. However, if you're a Southern California Edison customer, rebates are still available for a limited time. For more information and to submit your application for Zero Down Solar before the deadline, please call Varango at 800-998-9700. 800-998-9700. That's 800-998-9700. Certain terms and conditions apply. CSLB number 935263.
And welcome back to avnewscast.com on News Talk 1380.
Hi, Michelle. You back with us?
Michelle.
Where's Michelle?
I'm right here.
Oh, wonderful.
there she is.
Thanks.
I heard her in the
I
background.
thought she got sick of us and ran.
I haven't gone very far.
So, Michelle, can you explain further about the lawsuit and why you think it's important for us to take note to, what the position has?
Like for instance, Michelle, the city of Lancaster, one thing that they want to do, or their ordinance spells out, is that a registrant for life shall not reside within 2,000 feet of a school, park, or a daycare center. Okay, but they do have exclusions from that too. Okay, and exemptions. If you were a registrant, and it was prior to that ordinance coming into effect, it doesn't apply to you?
Well, the basis of that lawsuit is this. It violates both state and federal constitutions. That's the bottom line. I mean, if you really want to get down to the nuts and bolts. And it's not protecting anyone. Like I said, it's creating more danger, potential danger.
Well, but the ordinance is designed to protect, let's say, kids at school, okay? That there will not be a registered sex offender within 2,000 feet of the school. So that's designed to protect those kids.
Well, and you're looking at that, and I understand that, but the point is, the bottom line is, it violates both state and federal constitutions.
Okay.
And you can't do that. And there's been a lot of cities that have been sued over this.
And we spoke last night, and I said that I find it hard, and people can call me, say that I'm not compassionate and everything, but I find that if you take somebody's rights, then it's hard for me to get really worked up when your rights are taken in exchange. And I know that we talked about how the Founding Fathers didn't word it that way. But maybe something should be done. I think an amendment maybe that if you take rights away, that your rights be taken away.
Exactly.
That really bothers me, that an innocence rights are gone yet. And that's permanent damage. That's damage that is going to be with them forever.
Exactly.
But somebody that took those rights, they're good. I mean, it doesn't sit well with me inside.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that, and I can see why the general public would feel the same way. However, if I felt that in any way that leaving that ordinance there in place would protect essentially the general public, I would have left it alone.
You know, when you mentioned, I'm sorry, Michelle, when you mentioned that they can't live close to schools and stuff, and you don't want to put them in a position of being homeless. Okay, I get that part. But what about the rest of it? What else is part of it that you find it would be detrimental to them being able to continue their life and never touch kids again?
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back to the recidivism rate, the 1.9% committing a new sex crime. I mean, and Jeff and I talked about this last night. You look at the new sex crimes that have occurred in our area; they're not on the registry. They're new sex offenders, and 93% of sexual abuse cases that involve a child, they know who the person is.
It was a member of the family, or
I get
member
all
of the
that.
family, a coach, a
family
teacher,
friend, right.
you know.
It's just hard for me to put
anyone else.
myself in a position of
Boy Scout
caring about the rest of your existence when you've done that to a child
Well,
at any
and
level. And you know what I mean? It's
Right.
just like,
Right, but the responsibility, if you really look at a whole, and I mean, I'm a parent. I don't know if you're a parent.
yes, I am.
But
All of us are. Yep.
Oh, good. So we can talk about this. You know, we tell our kids about stranger danger and
Right.
everything like that. But you know what? It's not the strangers we have to be worried about.
Yeah,
It's
I
about
know.
the people that are closest to us. And so it goes back to parental responsibility and having that talk with your child. I mean, now that we have social media and everything, I mean, we can get into sexting. We can get onto, you know, online emails and Facebook and everything, the provocative pictures that are posted, you know, by individuals that are younger than 18.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
we have to look at the parental side. I mean, would you think it's fair that a parent gets charged with child endangerment or child neglect for not protecting their child?
Well,
Yeah, I do.
if they're not
I
protecting,
think,
I think so.
that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all those
we
parents.
have to look at the bottom line and who's actually responsible here, because a 15-year-old kid, I mean, their hormones. You talk about boys and girls; their hormones are going wild.
Mm-hmm.
They are,
And it's your job as a parent to put them in a safe environment and watch them 24/7. And I get that. And I successfully did it with my son and my daughter. And thankfully, nothing's ever happened to them. I've had, you know, I was molested as a child, so I understand. I understand it coming from an intimate part of the family because that's what happened to me. But in all honesty, my mother probably didn't watch me as well as she should have at that particular time.
And it's also the child communicating too. You know, the child communicating with a parent and having that open relationship where they can entrust them with anything. Because actually, the individuals who are victims of the crime feel that they're responsible for it.
And we talked about those coaches in recent news, and I don't know the parents, but you know that there's a lot of parents out there that had the accidental kid that has really interfered. You know, Casey Anthony's one of them that interfere with the lifestyle that they've had and enjoyed.
Right.
And find somebody that comes along that takes this quote-unquote burden off of their hands, and they're pleased to have it and don't do any vetting of that person. And those people should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Absolutely.
Exactly, and they are. They are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. They are. And when they come out, that's what we have to be concerned about, and also educating the parents. I mean, this is a taboo topic. It really is. Parents don't want to wake up and see what's really out there.
And parents also don't want to consider any lawsuit that might give a pedophile more rights. We don't care. And you know, I do have to retract a little bit, because when this happened to me, it was a family friend, and my mother had all rights and reasons to be to believe that I was in a safe environment. So I don't really think that she could have or needed to do something different than what happened to me. So I think I misspoke on that. But
and to answer that, I bet you were groomed by that individual that molested
I
you.
absolutely was.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely
and
was.
we have to talk about that. You know, the grooming. How do these predators come close to the children?
Yep.
You know, how do they groom them to be their victim?
Another thing that scares me are like divorced parents with young
boyfriends
kids,
and girlfriends,
and those boyfriends and girlfriends that work their way in. Are they necessarily going after the parent, or are they seeing a kid with a void in their life?
Well, I totally am. I'm definitely part of the line of thinking that if you're divorced and you have young kids, then you need to stay single until your kids are grown
Amen
out
to
the
that.
house.
Amen
because
to that.
it's not their fault. So you need to think
that.
about your child and work on making sure that they have a healthy.
Well, they have one
upbringing.
parent now where they should have had two, and
Exactly.
you've
And
got
you
to do
couldn't
double
fix that.
duty.
Yeah.
And, yes, and two, you know, we talk about the process and everything. If there's a parent out there that sees that someone is overly interested in their child, that is one of the ringing. You know, that is one of the red flags.
It sure
okay,
is. It
and
sure is.
I mean they're manipulative, they're conniving. You know, they will do anything to get that trust with that child that they're fixated on.
Okay, so
basically.
Michelle, this is Steve. I get that it is a parent's responsibility to take care and protect their kids. I really do. And I'm a single dad, you know, and I have a 13-year-old boy. However, you know, on top of that, the city of Lancaster is trying to backstop those parents that and equally try to protect kids from becoming victims by proposing and making ordinances to keep
pedophiles away.
Yeah, pedophiles, sex offenders away from kids.
Steve, wait a second. You can't violate the law in order to enforce the law. That's the bottom line.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with saying you can't go to a museum, park, any place that there's kids if you've abused
Movie
a
theater.
child.
They can go to a red box instead of a movie theater.
Yeah.
Okay, and I totally get. I understand that you're saying, you know, you can't step on somebody's constitutional rights.
Step on it.
I understand that, but there's two flip sides to that. Okay, and for instance, you know, one is their constitutional right as provided by the Constitution at law, and then the other one is more of a moral obligation.
And that supersedes. And you can put it on the ballot. Who's going to not vote for stepping on pedophiles' rights? Who's not going to vote on that?
I understand that.
They can't vote.
That's
Oh, that's right.
essentially, if you look at even if you go back to Jessica's law, you know, that's putting children more at risk too. And that was our own senator then, George Renner, that implemented Jessica's law.
Oh, you know what? Since we're talking about Jessica's law, this is the perfect time. I need to take a quick break, and I want to follow that up with George Renner.
Okay.
So hang on, and you're listening to AV Newscast on News Talk Radio 1380, and we'll be right back.
To make yourself more appealing to employers and take your career to the next level while enhancing your flexibility and improving your business leadership skills? Well, getting your MBA can do just that. California State University Bakersfield in the AV is responding to your needs and expanding its high-quality MBA program to the Antelope Valley. That's right. Now, right here in the AV, you have access to an AACSB MBA program, one of the top 5% MBA programs worldwide. The program can be completed in as little as 21 months and for less than $27,000. Convenient class schedules make it easier to continue working full-time while pursuing your MBA degree. To learn more about this high-quality MBA program, visit csub.edu/BPA/MBA or contact the MBA office at 952-5009. That's 952-5009. Registration is open now, so apply online at csubmentor.edu for the MBA program at California State University Bakersfield in the AV.
Our remember
the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
As long as I live.
As long as I live.
A storage tank ruptured, and for miles, chemicals were pushing up against the riverbanks.
This was a big, big deal, and it was going to have serious impact on communities up and down the river.
I remember the moment this local guy came up to me and said, "They call the guard out for this stuff?"
You probably thought we were all about hurricanes, tornadoes, fighting Mother Nature.
Hey, it's a chemical spill. It's a disaster.
It affects the water supply, threatens wildlife.
We're talking about the health of entire communities and people's livelihoods.
You bet we're ready for these kinds of things.
We were out there with booms to prevent the spill from expanding.
We're responsible for protecting and monitoring the sensitive wetlands.
I also remember the moment that same guy came up to me and said, "I don't know what we would have done if they hadn't called the guard up."
Learn more about how you can protect your friends, families, neighbors, and the environment. Everything that makes up your community. Go to NationalGuard.com.
Sponsored by the California National Guard. Aired by the California Broadcasters Association and this station.
Welcome back to Avnewscast.com, where we have our glow sticks and we're dancing around.
Hi, Michelle.
First off, before we get going, I want to give the phone number out. It's area code 661-266-4420. Please call in and give us your input.
Hey, Michelle. So before we went to break, we were talking about Senator George Runner and Jessica's Law. Okay. Okay. Which Senator Runner was a real proponent for that. Mm-hmm. Tell me, how is it that Jessica's Law fails to protect or puts kids at greater risk?
Well, I mean, here's the question. Does Jessica's Law make anyone feel safer?
A little bit.
Well, I mean, but do any of the major components of it actually increase safety? You know, I mean, there's really very little evidence that's the case.
Well, okay. Let's apply that to the city of Lancaster's ordinances. Do their ordinances increase safety? And I'd have to say, if there is a 1.92% chance of somebody recommitting another crime, okay, that is a registered sex offender, then their ordinance actually does protect, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing I don't understand is how would the public feel safer with an offender roaming the street homeless?
Well.
Okay, I mean that's the bottom line there.
Well, why aren't the families moving? When your brother or your son is locked up because he's been touching on kids and he's got 8 years, and you know you live near a school, move. You got 8 years to figure it out, so that you can provide a shelter over your kin folks when he gets out. So figure it out. Like, you know, why does it have to be a responsibility or a burden on us? Why do we have to worry about the second house on the left on my way taking my kid to school because the guy is too close? Move.
But, and I understand your position on that, but the elements of Jessica's Law are failing. They
how?
are.
And
how?
Yeah, how?
Because it goes back to the restrictions, further restricting. And I mean, you can go from Jessica's Law to Chelsea's Law to the Adam Welch Law. I mean, you can go right down the pike here. But, and this is one key thing that the three-judge court panel right now is deciding on that lawsuit that came out of San Diego.
Because the restrictions are too overbroad.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes. And, I mean, our ordinance is the worst of the worst out of all of them. The worst of the worst.
You mean the city of Lancaster?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Let's take the Halloween ordinance for instance. Okay. To me, as a parent, and to many other parents and listeners out there, it makes perfect sense that if you are a registered sex offender, and you are required to register for life, that why would you want to decorate your house for Halloween to draw more kids to come to your front door, knowing that these little 8-year-olds may totally turn this guy on?
What do you think the probability of an offender is, a registered sex offender, is snatching a kid off their front porch?
But that's not the point. Is that the point?
But
that's not the point.
Okay, you know what?
It opens a door. It opens a dialogue.
I agree with Operation Boo. Personally,
okay.
I agree with Operation Boo. I'm fine with Operation Boo. I mean, if that's what makes the public feel safer, you know, on Halloween night, then I'm all for that. You know,
so is your biggest issue?
I'm for protecting the child.
Okay, so is your only issue where they get to live?
It includes the libraries, it includes the movie theaters that have arcades and everything. I mean, it's further restricting the movement of an individual.
Okay, so Michelle, why do they need to go into an arcade?
Well, wait a minute. Cause
I just want to know.
I know, but let me talk on that too. Okay, 1 second, because I did read the lawsuit front to back, and I did a little bit of research on this yesterday. I do understand the fact that the one complaint is because of the ordinance, a registered sex offender cannot go to Cinemark movie theater in the Antelope Valley because it has more than four or more arcade games, and they're not allowed to be anywhere where there's an arcade game. Mm-hmm. So therefore, they can't attend the movies.
That's true.
Okay,
that's true. And going back to that, back to the ordinance, this ordinance was passed on myths like stranger danger. It wasn't adopted on facts. Actually, it was false statistics that they were going on.
Okay, but it's still potentially saving a kid from being exposed to someone that might have harmful thoughts towards them. So what's the problem with that?
Well, and two, there's a difference between sexual violent predators and sex offenders. Okay, the SVPs are the one that we have to be cautious of. And however, when they get out of incarceration, most of them go for civil commitment. They get civilly committed. So there's a difference here. And it goes back to the recidivism rate, 1.9%, that they're going to commit a new sex crime.
Right, and I totally understand your point in that. I'm just asking, why is that bothering anybody if we say that you can't go into an arcade? Why should we say, you know what, you should have a right to go play Galactica? Why?
Well, because it further restricts their movement. It's actually with those restrictions, it's actually putting the public at risk, like I've been saying.
They can't go out and get a PS3 at home and hit the red box.
Well, there's a lot of restrictions on registered sex offenders, especially in the state of California. As far as going online and having Facebook accounts and everything like that. So, there's further restrictions there, but it's like I said, this ordinance isn't protecting public; it's putting them at greater risk, and therefore that's why I stepped up and asked Janice Belushi and her organization to come and help me on it.
You mean because let's say because a registered sex offender, for instance, can't go to the library or can't go to see a movie or to an arcade, it's going to further exacerbate the situation because now they have to go look for some other way to find enjoyment?
Say that one more time.
Is that what you're saying? Well, why does it put us more at risk when they can't go to the movie theater and sit behind my son who's there innocently watching Nemo?
Right, and that goes to the examples of dynamic risk factors, that are relevant to post-release supervision of these individuals, because there's a lot of risk factors. And what's happening is that ordinance would enhance those risk factors for the potential of reoffending. And, you talk about the risk factors. Some is substance abuse, pervasive, anger and hostility, antisocial values, negative social influences. The thing is that by discussing this, public safety can be enhanced by promoting successful outcomes for registered sex offenders.
Right,
now do you understand a little bit more? Because it has to go with prisoner reentry.
I'm getting the
because they're
not being able to have a residence.
Yeah,
I get the pedophiles at large then.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still not getting what the increased risk is with the library and the movie theater.
It goes to the risk level. It essentially goes to the risk level of the offender. You put more barriers on this individual, you're actually enhancing the potential for them to reoffend.
So you're frustrating them to the point where they're going to pop. Is that what you're saying?
If we give them the ability to go look at our kids, hopefully they won't go touch them?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But we have to, that's why I'm doing this segment, coming behind that sex offender lawsuit, is to inform and engage the public.
Right.
Let's wake up. Let's come out of the closet. Let's not live back in ancient days. We have to talk about this. And, especially with AB 109 that just came into play.
Well, let's give us some more. Let's give us some of the the risk factors and stuff we want to look for, some of the red flags and that kind of thing. What we want to, what we can bristle up about when we see somebody, and what should be a warning to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the best ways to protect children and teens from being victims of sexual abuse is to help them understand and be aware of the issues of sexual abuse. Having that conversation, not about the birds and the bees, but be very frank, and to educate everyone in the family is one thing. To start talking with your family about sexual abuse, to set very clear family boundaries, and to get safe adults involved is another way, and to care enough to reach out, for help, and to also know the resources and how to use them. One case and example was I sent you a link onto a website that helps essentially everyone in the situation, which is the Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, and Registering and Tracking. Mm-hmm. With the U.S. Department of Justice. I mean, we have to. If we're going to combat crime, we have to get smart on crime.
Okay, I'll agree with that 100%, Michelle. I agree, and I do 100% agree with you that the parents do have a responsibility to talk openly and engage their kids so the kids understand what to look for. Okay, and also so the kids will throw up a red flag if there's anything remotely close, and come back and tell the parents.
Well, an informed child is a more protected child. That's that's for absolute sure.
But
I'm also a psychotic parent.
Right, but my concern is the 6-year-old child that is over at the park with some other friends, and there's 4 kids and one parent, and the city of Lancaster is trying to keep the registered sex offenders away from that park, which to me makes complete sense, because you don't want them being where other kids are. But your argument partially is that all these ordinances pretty much guarantee that they're going to end up back in prison for a violation.
Well, for a technical violation, I mean, the restrictions of parole and probation regarding sex offenders, registered sex offenders, is very strict. Very strict.
As it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it should be. Because you go back to the case up in Northern California with Philip Dorado, I think his last name was.
Greedo.
And how he kept that girl for 18 plus years. She had 2 children, and it was, that's essentially what happened. It takes something to happen to make a difference, to make a change, and CDCR is doing an exceptional job, especially here in the Antelope Valley parole complex, with the 290s. I mean, I've been very involved with communicating with the parole agents of the offenders that I have on my caseload.
Okay.
So that's what's essential here, and a case in point is, I have a 290 that was going to be homeless. However, in order to get the funding and the approval from parole, there was a 24-hour period there that he would have been homeless.
Well, you know what strikes me? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what strikes me is whoever his family member is doesn't feel enough about him to move so that they can live with him. But but you're saying that we should allow him to be able to be closer to our schools. But the family member can't get up and move so they can take care of their pedophile, whatever.
It's the social stigma.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a box that you painted yourself into.
Yeah.
So own your box.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Pick it up and deal with what you got to deal with. Or say, you know what, maybe I shouldn't touch little kids because all my rights are going to be gone for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. But, and that goes too, given the number and nature of the barriers to sex offender reentry, that's why engaging the community members like yourself and your radio listeners and developing those community partners is essential, basically, to successful reintegration strategies. This is not a strategy with that ordinance. It's not. And that's for the courts to decide. But if you're going, as I've said, negative public sentiment can fuel resistance to sex offender reentry.
Well, there's not going to be any positive public sentiment.
Well,
who's thinking positively of that?
I understand that. But it goes basically down to the bottom of the barrel. This violates both the state and federal constitution.
Well, they shouldn't have violated the child.
Right, but I understand.
That's true. And the parent should have been watching out for their child too.
No. When you have a 13-year-old and they're in school and they're minding their business and a janitor snatches them, that has nothing to do with what the parent did or didn't do.
Their teachers are feeding them special cookies.
Yes, it has to go back to the teachers too.
So don't cop straight to the parent, because that kind of bothers me a little bit, because
Steve did a growl. We need to go to a break.
Oh, you guys are wonderful. You guys are lethal. You're lethal. But hopefully you'll understand, especially, all three of you, we've educated you pretty well on the ordinance and stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully and I'm sorry, so sorry you were violated, when you were a young child. And that's very traumatic. However, it's about increasing the awareness with the public and, sex offender registration and community notification practices. There's a lot of things here that we're responsible for as a community.
We have to go to break?
Yep, we really have to go.
Right. And you know what, Michelle? I totally understand that we've got two things here. One is the ordinance at law and whether it's overbearing or not. And clearly you may have a compelling argument there, or the lawsuit may. But the other flip side to that is the moral aspect about it. And I want to talk to you as soon as we get back. I have to take a break, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So hang on. You're listening to AV Newscast on News Talk Radio 1380, the number one listen to News Talk radio program in the Antelope Valley, and we'll be right back.
Steve.
The staff at Powerhouse Gym reminds our women listeners that breast and cervical cancer are very serious issues. Many women are diagnosed each year with these silent predators, so please schedule a complete physical and screening today. That message sponsored by Todd Mapes and everyone at Powerhouse Gym, offering great workout programs for adults. Call them at 661-723-7162. That's 661-723-7162. Or visit them on the web at powerhouse.com. That's Powerhouse Gym at 42212 10th Street West, Suite 6A in Lancaster.
Do you think of golf all the time? Do you imagine you're playing golf all the time? Do you take practice swings in the hallway or in your cubicle? Do you know a golfer? Is he or she as addicted as you are? Then you need to get a grip.
Hi, this is Paul from the Get a Grip Golf Talk Show, and we can help get your fix. Swing fix, that is. We'll be going on the air January 5th. It can be heard on Saturdays from 9 to 10 in the morning on 1380 AM. We'll be talking PGA, LPGA, Champions Tour, from tee to green and everything in between, giving you product reviews, what's in the bag, golf tips, lots of call-ins, giveaways, and more. So listen in and get a grip.
And welcome back to AV Newscast on News Talk 1380.
Hey, Michelle.
Yes.
One point that you're trying to make, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, is that if we get behind the people, registered sex offenders, when they get out of prison and allow them an opportunity to get back into life and try to lead a productive life, the streets will be safer.
Much safer.
That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm. That's very accurate. And we have to talk about, contemporary sex offender management strategies, and we have to look at the strategies that are going to be effective, when monitoring these individuals. And that's why, community notification meetings can enhance, citizens' perception of their safety, to minimize negative reactions to sex offenders. I mean, this is a very unique population to work with, and I've seen nothing but success with it.
Okay, but because of, there's a lot of registered sex offenders that totally abscond, right? There's a fair amount.
It's harder to say that they abscond because they have a GPS unit attached to their ankle, an ankle monitor,
right?
While they're under supervision. So it's a little bit more difficult. However, we had one recently that cut it off and he went his own way.
Right.
And luckily, law enforcement took care of that with parole and got them back.
And don't you have to wonder? Don't you have to wonder if they're cutting off their GPS, their ankle bracelet? They're cutting it off because they don't want to get tracked, right?
Not necessarily, and I don't know the stats on that.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's something for me to discuss with parole. What amount of our sex offenders do abscond from supervision? But I would be safe to say it's very, very low, very low, and that goes back to community supervision. In order to have the surveillance over these individuals, we're actually bleeding the resources over this ordinance in order to try and surveil them.
Okay.
We're taking away the resources for this.
Okay. I did look at the ordinance with the city of Lancaster, and let's just say the libraries, for instance, or what have you. If a registered sex offender has a need to walk from point A to point B and it crosses in front of a library or a school or what have you, they're allowed to do that.
They are allowed to do that.
They're not allowed to linger, but they're allowed to go from point A to point B in a speedy manner.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or if they're a registered sex offender and they have kids that go to that school and they have to walk their kids to that school, they're allowed to do that.
Correct.
Okay. So part of those ordinances are not that overbroad. The city of Lancaster is really trying to do the best they can to protect.
Well, and that goes back to my saying, it's not protecting. And I've offered many, many times to put reentry on the table. And this is one of the topics that would go on that table. Sex offender, reentry and management. And policies and practices that we can develop and try to maximize the limited resources, for successful outcomes for them.
So what is your ideal situation if you were to draft some kind of ordinance to
protect
better
them
facilitate them reentering society and to help us? What would you like to see it be?
Well, I would like to go back to the old ordinance, and keep Operation Boo on there. Mm-hmm. But where it doesn't violate the state and federal constitutions. I mean, let's get on board here. Let's talk about actual statistics versus the myths and fear mongering. We can't instill fear to produce an ordinance. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the sex offenders. It can be any ordinance.
Well, I think the sex offenders have instilled the fear.
Pardon?
I think the sex offenders have instilled the fear. The government's just reacting to it.
Well, and Mayor Paris and the city council is instilling more fear. And that's not correct, and that's why I stepped up to the plate to handle this situation. Now, whichever way the city decides to go on this, whether they're going to fight it or repeal it, that's another issue, that will be addressed hopefully at the next city council meeting. But, and that's why I've said to numerous people, where I've blogged at, hey, you have a voice and you have a choice. Why don't you come to city council and air your choice, whether you oppose it or you're for it?
Well, we do need way more
participation in city government.
Right.
We do. And, it's embarrassing to see 20 people, 30 people in there, unless there's awards given out or some special event.
It's amazing to see this huge turnout over a Walmart versus turnout over an ordinance for sex offenders.
Exactly. There was more people. I think the whole chamber was filled, and there was overflow on that one.
Yeah.
Well, how does that information get out there? How would people know?
Well, it isn't, because people do know, and Jeffrey and I have talked about this on the show before, that, people will sit home and be a Monday morning quarterback, and they'll argue and complain and say something's terrible, but when it involves them physically getting up, getting dressed, suiting up, and going to the city of Lancaster and standing at a city council meeting, they don't take the effort.
No, they don't. But yet, like you said, they'll argue, moan, and groan, and complain because they don't like something. Well, essentially, they elected these individuals in there, and they can hold them accountable for understanding their positions. And that goes to, their voice. They have the right to stand up there for 3 minutes and give a presentation.
Right.
Now whether they take it or not is a different story. Unfortunately, Mayor Parris doesn't feel that he should talk about prisoner reentry, and essentially we could have curbed this problem a long time ago, and it wouldn't have taken a lawsuit. That's what's unfortunate, because he will not engage himself or that city council with the public in discussing these issues.
Well,
especially somebody like myself. I mean, I've tried to get prisoner reentry on the table for 3 years, and the man doesn't want to deal with it. He wants to arrest his way out of the problem. Well, that's not the solution, because that put us in the position that we're in with the state right now and the U.S. Supreme Court. So we have to essentially look at different avenues here.
Right. Well, maybe you need to take your conversation of prisoner reentry and take it to local state officials and state electeds versus versus the city.
I've been doing that. I've been doing that slowly but surely. I'm making my way up the chain of command, because if we're going to look at AB 109 and if that's going to be successful, we have to talk about prisoner reentry. We have to talk about the community's involvement. Each city, in the 58 counties that we have, are actually responsible for what's going in and what's coming out.
I understand.
I mean, I could have saved the city thousands of dollars if they just would have listened.
Right. A lot of people, we've only got a couple of minutes left, or even a minute left on the show, but a lot of people claim that the Antelope Valley is a dumping ground for a lot of the sexual predators that get out of prison.
That's not true, because when a prisoner comes back, when they're released from custody, they go back to their county of commitment. Okay? Now, their county of commitment would be, 300,000 square miles of LA County. But they have to go back to their last registered city that they came out of, unless they put in for a transfer. So it's not being a dumping ground. Just because we have a prison here does not mean they're dumping the inmates right out here.
Okay.
They're not.
I understand. We're going to end up ending the show in just a second, Michelle. But I want to thank you for taking the time, not just on Tuesday, but also taking an hour today on the phone
you for all your time.
to come on to the show. I do find some of your points interesting, and I do understand that we are talking about violating somebody's constitutional rights, but the flip side of that is the victim's rights were violated, and that's what everybody is so upset about.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, to be able to come back to the show and talk about educating the public and on sex offenders and sexual abuse.
All right. Thanks again, Michelle. I appreciate
Michelle.
it. You're listening to AV Newscast on News Talk Radio 1380. We'll be right back.